Welcome to Classic Movie Recall. I'm James Mall here with Lara Scott. Say hi, Lara.
Hi, Lara.
And today we're going to be talking about Dinner at 8 from 1933. But before we talk about the movie, we have to talk about this incredible place where we're sitting right now.
Oh yeah, we're at the legendary home that once belonged to actor, star, legend, one of my all-time favorites, John Barrymore, who of course is one of the stars of today's film, Dinner at 8.
The house was designed by architect John Byers, and it was built in the 1920s for another Hollywood luminary, director-producer King Vidor. And someone around that time named the house Bella Vista.
Yeah, meaning beautiful view, and for very good reason. The views here are so amazing. You can see the ocean, and we're actually high up enough in Beverly Hills that you kind of get a sea breeze. Very refreshing. The main house has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, but it also has a basement tavern, 2 libraries, and an incredible octagon living room. And there are 2 original guest cottages and a newer 2-story guest house with 3 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, and 2 living rooms. Fit your whole family here. The whole property spreads over 3.5 acres, and it also includes a lot of patios and great outdoor areas like where we are, and a wonderful swimming pool area with a waterfall.
And Lara is ready to move in.
Oh yeah, my stuff is on its way. All I need is for you to give me the down payment, James.
Yeah, I'll buy the nachos for the pool party.
Yeah, or you could be the pool boy.
Can you imagine though, just sitting here right now, how the parties that they must have been having in the 1930s and 40s and how amazing that must have been.
If these walls could talk.
John Barrymore was actually living here when he made Dinner at 8 and Grand Hotel too. Both of which were made at MGM, which was in Culver City, not that far from where we are sitting right now.
Yeah, and after John Barrymore passed away in 1942, various other people owned the property, and they say, rumor has it, that the guest houses were occupied by some pretty famous names over the years, like Katharine Hepburn, Marlon Brando, and Candice Bergen.
Soon to be occupied by Lara Scott.
Soon to be me on this place. And then in the 1990s, the home was purchased and revitalized by director Tony Scott and his family.
So that's 3 film legends who at various times lived under this roof, which is why we decided to make this our location for 3 episodes of Classic Movie Recall, to talk about 3 classic films: The Champ from King Vidor, Top Gun from Tony Scott, and of course today's film, Dinner at 8, starring John Barrymore.
I want to cheer for each of those 3 amazing films. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Dinner at 8 is our film today. It's from 1933 and is about a society woman planning a dinner at 8. Simple, right? But there's so much more going on in this film. And by the way, the society woman is played by Glinda the Good Witch, Billy Burke, 6 years before The Wizard of Oz. She's so great. Millicent, it's Mrs. Oliver Jordan. So she's trying to find an extra man for her dinner party. And the man turns out to be an over-the-hill alcoholic actor played by John Barrymore, who unbeknownst to her is having an affair with her teenage daughter. Stay with me, James. Her husband is Lionel Barrymore. Yes, John's real-life brother. Now, his character's shipping company is about to be taken over by Wallace Beery, who has a hot young wife, played by Jean Harlow, who's having an affair with her doctor. And oh yes, Marie Dressler plays a former stage star visiting from Europe. So scandal and intrigue abound before the cocktails and hors d'oeuvres have even been served, and a film that really captures the magic of Tinseltown and MGM in the 1930s.
All right, that was a great summary, and it was just about as tangled as the movies itself, in a good way. Dinner at 8 is a great snapshot of film from the 1930s, and people call this a comedy with dramatic elements, but somehow to me, I think of this more like a drama with some comedic elements. I mean, it's not like the Marx Brothers or anything, that Screwball or the Thin Man series with all its sophistication humor, but I don't know, what do you think? Is this a comedy or a drama?
Well, I wouldn't call it a comedy totally. I agree that it's a drama, but there's some really funny moments. Like there's this one scene where a servant is telling Marie Dressler, who's in her 60s at this point, how she saw Marie on the stage years ago when the servant was a little girl, and Marie is all, how extraordinary. Perhaps we can have a chat about the Civil War sometime, just the 2 of us. Perfect. But it is dark, and for me, the heartbreaking moments really come from the Barrymores, from Lionel and John.
All right, let's talk about John Barrymore as an actor. I mean, obviously this was an ensemble cast, but for me, John Barrymore was the standout actor in this movie. Yeah. It was a very powerful and very committed performance, I think, that he gave.
So it makes sense that our first clip that we're going to see features John Barrymore as Larry, and a scene between him and Madge Evans, who plays the young girl that he's having an affair with.
You don't know what it means to be up against it. Keep fighting him every second. To pull yourself up, hand over hand, while they're waiting with a knife to cut the rope. Well, I'm not through yet. I'll show them. If they think I'm finished.
Okay, so before Dinner at 8 was made, MGM had just released a film called Grand Hotel, which was the first film to feature an all-star cast with interwoven storylines. In fact, some of the same stars are also in Dinner at 8. It was based on the mega success of that film with Depression-era audiences. MGM followed up quickly with this movie.
Yeah, like a year later. And this was the first film that I ever saw Jean Harlow in, and I love her. She was such a revelation to me as Kitty Packard. She plays the wife of Wallace Beery, and I love it when she's all, I'm going to be a lady if it kills me.
And think about Marie Dressler.
Yes.
I mean, who knew? She was phenomenal.
I knew.
And in fact, after John Barrymore, I think she was really the standout star of this movie.
Yeah, and she actually was a really big star at the time. She was an Oscar-winning actress who had starred in lots of silent films and was able to make that transition to sound film, becoming one of MGM's most popular stars in the 30s.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think these days, don't really know her name, but they should.
Yeah, I agree. She's brilliant in this film, especially how she does one of the greatest double takes in cinema history and delivers one of the final lines with Jean Harlow. They have one scene together. I'm not going to ruin the fun by sharing it here, but it really is one of those unforgettable moments.
And Wallace Beery was another huge star who you don't really hear much about these days.
Yeah, he always plays these guys who are rough around the edges, flawed characters or bad guys like he is in this film. But you can see why he had such a major career. Now, he won an Oscar for his role in another film we discussed in our episode about The Champ, which, by the way, was directed by King Vidor, another former resident of this house. And James, you're right that he doesn't seem to be as well remembered as you'd like to think. So let's watch a scene with Wallace Beery and Jean Harlow that gives us a glimpse into what their relationship is like in the film and what a great comedian Jean, who everyone called the baby, is.
Well, tomorrow Oliver Jordan can go and buy himself a little rowboat and start all over again. He'll never know who done it.
Yeah, you're so smart you're gonna land in jail someday. Tina, where are my slippers?
I'm just beginning, Tootsie. I'm just beginning. Whose wife's got any bigger bracelets than you've got, huh? Remember what I told you last week?
I don't remember what you told me a minute ago.
About Washington? Don't you remember that?
Okay, so let's talk about the behind-the-camera talent, because let's face it, it ain't too shabby.
Yeah, it's an understatement. The film was directed by none other than the great George Cukor, who later became known as the woman's director because he directed a record number of Oscar-winning performances from actresses over the years.
But apparently he didn't really like being known as a woman's director, although it's funny because he directed Little Women with Katharine Hepburn, and later he directed The Philadelphia Story, also with Hepburn, Camille with Greta Garbo, Holiday with Audrey Hepburn, Adam's Rib, again with Hepburn. Can you believe I know all these? A Star is Born, the 1954 version with Judy Garland, and My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn again. So whether he liked it or not, he was great at working with these powerhouse women.
You see, a perfect moment to talk about Frances Marion,
Yes.
speaking of powerhouse women.
Yes, the screenwriter. I know you're a big fan of
Oh
hers.
my gosh, I love her so much. She is, I think, my favorite screenwriter, and she's a name that everybody watching this needs to remember. She was the female screenwriter of the 20th century. Her list of writing credits is mind-boggling, and one little side story that I love. So when Frances Marion was just starting out in her career, Marie Dressler was a very big stage actress and gave Frances, a reporter at the time in San Francisco, an interview, and she was just very kind to her. So years later, when Frances was an influential writer and Marie Dressler was at a low point in her career, Frances convinced Irving Thalberg, who was her boss at MGM, to give Marie a major role in a film, and it completely revived Marie's career. And there's so many stories like this of how women in early Hollywood really supported and looked out for each other.
Yeah, for all the bleak stories you hear about in Hollywood in this film business, it's nice to hear a story like that.
That's the only story like that. No, but I know what you mean. Right?
So Frances wrote Dinner at 8 together with Herman Mankiewicz, and it had been a play by George S. Kaufman and Edna Ferber. And every now and then, I think it kind of does feel a little bit like a play. You know, some of the scenes are kind of heavy with dialogue. And I don't know how you felt about it. It didn't really bother me at all, probably because the actors were so amazing.
Well, I happen to love theater, so a film that feels like a really great play is not a bad thing for me. But that's what I love about classic film, just the great dialogue and the fact that it really transports you to another era.
It does transport you, this film. It is kind of like a snapshot of a whole time period when it comes to the styles and the way people speak and the whole look of it. But story-wise, I think it really plays well today. I mean, we don't think of 1933 being so full of things like adultery and social climbing and financial backstabbing and shallowness like some of us have today. But it was all there in this movie, and they were able to get away with it. And even some hints of sexual innuendo, because this was 1933, before the code, before the motion picture production code. And at that point, they started to impose heavy censorship on films. And that was only a year later.
Yeah, and because it's a pre-code film, I think it has more of a contemporary feel.
Yeah.
It had this realism to it, this kind of like grittiness that surprised me. But at the same time, it's very glam and slick and just really beautiful to look at. And I kept thinking about what it must have been like for audiences chances back then in the midst of the Great Depression to come in and be taken away to this magical place of wealth and high society while probably sitting in a very gorgeous movie palace. You know, James, my dad was born in the 20s, and he used to spend all day at the movies when he was like 5 years old. His parents would just send him off. And it was interesting to watch this film and imagine him sitting in a theater in 1933, escaping just all the sadness around him with the Great Depression. Yeah.
So in every episode, Lara and I award up to 50 points each for a total of a possible 100 points. And we've given 100, a perfect score, to Charlie Chaplin's City Lights. I think that's the only one we've given so far, right? So let's see how close Dinner at 8 can come to that perfect score. Lara, what's your recall rating?
Well, as a fan of Art Deco in 1930s fashion, I think it's a must-see for that alone. Now, the effect of the acting and the look of it and the smart writing and the gowns is intoxicating. And even from the opening moments where you see John and Jean and Marie and their heads around these plates in the middle of a dinner setting, the film is so well done and snappy. I wanted to say 48 for Dinner at 8 because it would rhyme, but I give it a 49 because it's that good. James, your turn.
Well, this is one of those films that anyone who's interested in classic movies or the golden age of Hollywood really should watch. I think anyone watching it would enjoy the stories and all the things that Lara mentioned. And when it comes to the emergence of major film studios like MGM and the creation of mega movie stars, things that ultimately define Hollywood, this is it. Dinner at 8 was directed by George Cukor, produced by David O. Selznick, made for MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which was headed by Irving Thalberg, and so it just doesn't get more Hollywood than that. This film was hugely popular when it was released in the 1930s, and it still holds up today. It's not quite a 50 for me, but I give it a 45.
Okay, 49 and a 45 for a total of 94 for Dinner at 8. Good score.
Thank you for watching our podcast, the watch version, not just the audio version. Is it fair to call it a podcast if it's a watch version and not an audio version? Okay. Anyway, thank you to Adam Press and David Kramer and everyone at Hilton and Highland for welcoming us to this spectacular home, once owned by John Barrymore and soon to be owned by Lara.
Yes, sometime in my life. Now, you can subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes so you never miss an episode, and visit our website where you can check out all the recall ratings for the films we've discussed and read our blog, and that's at classicmovierecall.com.
Crab meat.
Serve the crab meat. Serve the nuts.